What's better than earning money from a 9-to-5 job? It's earning money while you sleep, which is made possible if you start investing. You're listening to the Real Estate Investing Demystified with your very own dynamic duo, Ava Benesocky and August Biniaz. Tune in as we discuss everything real estate, both on the passive and active sides. We feature life-changing stories of today's real estate leaders that will help build your own roadmap to success. This is a show that will lead you to a diversified portfolio, a much bigger revenue, and a next-level venture that brings you a smooth cash flow. Let's get this episode started. All right, everybody. Today we are joined by Alex Olson. So
you got right into it, Ava.
I got right into it, as always, right? I get so excited.
It's all good. It's all good. People just listening for the first time or watching for the first time, they think you're a rookie. They don't know that you've done 120 shows.
125, August.
125.
Interviewed 125 expert guest speakers, and we're so excited because we keep bringing valuable information, and people are, when they contact us, it's like, hey, I learned about something new. And I'm utilizing it now. So it's absolutely. We love what we do.
We learn lots from our guests that we bring on. We've partnered with some guests. Some guests have invested with us. So it's truly amazing. The show taught us a lot, and we want to keep it going. And great, you got right into it. So we have a great show for you guys today. Ava gave up the big reveal, which was who was our guest right the first second. Well, that's fine. Alex is on the show. Alex Olson. If you'd like to give his background a bit.
I will actually, but before I do that, Alex actually works with one of our good friends, Logan Freeman, which we have a lot of respect for. And we actually interviewed Logan on our show. You guys. No, Alex, no pressure or anything, but it was one of the best episodes, honestly, and we enjoyed it so much and learned so much from Logan. And
you can tell because Ava actually wasn't falling asleep. Sometimes we have guests and I have to give her a nudge. So with Logan, that wasn't the case, and so no, it was great. One thing I learned from Logan, I just want to mention, is this idea of immersion. So he was talking about quoting these books that he had read in the past, and then what he would do is I said, how do you remember that? How do you remember the book so vividly, and you're using it in your talk today? Is it because I immerse myself when I read a book? I don't just read it once and say I read it, I'm gone. I actually spend weeks and weeks immersing myself in this book.
In one book at a time.
In that one book at a time.
Yeah.
Sometimes
and he writes notes.
Months. And they have this thing about CEOs reading 60, 80 books a year. Okay, sure, whatever. That's the reason they're billionaires, because they read a lot of books. Whatever, but the idea is remembering. You can't just read books and just have it there. But if you immerse yourself like Logan was talking. Anyways, enough about Logan. Let's get into our man Alex over here.
Really excited about our episode today, everyone. We're going to be talking about 1031 exchange, and Alex is a 1031 exchange expert. And he's also a broker, or as we like to call them here in Canada, agents.
Yeah, so just a bit of clarification. So in Canada, for whatever reason this is, we call real estate agents, realtors, agents.
Yeah.
In the US, they call them brokers. We do have a phrase broker that we use here in Canada, and we use broker for mortgage brokers. So
it can be a little confusing, but that's what we're here for.
He's a broker. He's an agent. He's all of the above. He focuses on 1031 exchanges.
Yes.
And we're excited to chat with him. So let's welcome our guest.
Welcome,
He's been
Alex.
Sitting back patiently.
Thanks for being here today.
Hey guys, how you guys doing?
We're doing great. How are you?
Oh, it's beautiful over here. We got weather in the 70s, and I can't complain.
Amazing.
And that's Kansas. Is that Kansas City?
Yes, you got it correct. Yep, Kansas City, right smack dab in the middle here. With sometimes it can be 30s and 40s this time of year. Sometimes it can be 80s, and so here we are at 70s. So no complaints.
That's Beautiful. Fahrenheit for all you Canadians.
That's right.
Awesome, Alex. Well, let's dive into things. Can you start off by telling us about your background and then your start in real estate, please?
Yeah, so I spent about 15 years in consumer finance before I really full-time transitioned into real estate. And I think, it's pretty very common in the real estate world. We're all entrepreneurs, right? Because we have this desire to want to do things on our own and build wealth. And I was actually looking for a new job the entire time I worked there for 15 years. Now I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I always had a side hustle, whether it was doing whatever, trying to make a few extra bucks here and there, looking for a new job. And what happened was actually we built our dream house, my wife and I did, and we had a ton of capital So we had a ton of equity stored up in that purchase because we did a really good job of keeping expenses down. It was worth a lot more than what we paid for it. And so I was like, heck, let's take out a home equity line of credit. And so we did. I learned a lot about financing, whatever home equity line of credit was at that time. I became a real estate investor first, well before I had anything to do with becoming a real estate agent. And I met a mentor actually as I was acquiring these properties. This guy wouldn't sell me his house. I wanted to buy his house as a Airbnb house here in the Kansas City area, downtown. But I was very persistent. And he was the one that told me, hey, look, you're really persistent. You kind of seem like you might know a thing or two about real estate, even though you're not an agent. You should go out and get your license. And so lo and behold, I said, okay, that's fine. Let's do that. And I actually met Logan through doing that because he was the one that was with a brokerage firm that I had eyed as, hey, look, I think I would be a good fit to work with this. And so Logan, he and I met, had drinks, talked about it. He really gave me the confidence to know that I could be decently successful as a real estate broker agent. And here we are, I don't know, a couple, 2, 3, 4 years later, and I'm a commercial real estate broker focused in Kansas City, and have loved almost every moment of it.
Awesome. Couple quick questions for you.
Awesome.
What is consumer finance?
So consumer finance, it's a little bit different than, say, mortgage broker or somebody who works specifically in larger loans. This is like small dollar lending. We're talking micro loans, $100 up to $1,000 kind of thing. And so it's basically, if you're here in the United States, you can see these, payday loans that they call them, short-term loans. And so I was actually working with a Native American tribe that was organizing this product, and we were a nationwide-ish lender, so to speak, here in the U.S., and worked in that space. Yeah, like I said, for about 15 years.
Got it. It's more transactional though. Your personality as in the brokerage space doesn't really come into play in that space. Is that right?
Yeah, it really has nothing to do with each other other than you're learning about finance. Well, I was learning about finance as I was running this consumer finance arm. APR, some of those kind of things. A lot of that stuff didn't really apply. But then when you transition out of that into the real estate space, of course, everything is extrapolated and exaggerated into a much longer time frame. But still there's some relationships there. But to be frank, there isn't a whole lot of commonality other than just running a business,
Got it. And then as far as your mentor, who was your mentor that you connected with?
So he's actually here in Kansas City. His name's Brad Geidert, and he owns like 50 houses in this popular area by a university. And he's kind of this old school guy of hard work and came from nothing, the standard kind of story. And he was a wealth advisor, and then he got into real estate, and then we became friends because of where he came from, and
Awesome.
and connected on that level. Yeah.
Always good to have a mentor.
Absolutely.
So
but
cool.
it was more on the single family, not the multifamily space that you're in currently. And then I guess the last question, when was that transition that you left your job and connected with Logan and started your career with?
Yeah. So what happened there was, like I said, I was always looking for a different job, and I never left my job as a full-time W-2 employee doing this consumer finance stuff. What had happened was, I met Logan, and he's, kind of helped tell me, yeah, you can kind of do this part-time. And I said, I don't want to do this part-time long-term. And he said, no, I totally get it. Something's going to happen. Well, what happened was the pandemic happened. And thankfully I got fired from my job, even though I was there for 15 years. And it was, a complicated reason of such. The co-founder was leaving the company, and I was actually started with the co-founder. I started about 2 or 3 months after he started. He brought me on board. No real reason, just he brought me on board, and we ended up leaving the company at the same time. And so, which was actually a blessing, because literally that same day, within an hour of me getting a notification I was no longer going to be employed there, I called Logan. I said, hey, look, man, I'm full time on this. Let's go. That was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And, here we are. And I'd already done several transactions part-time through that process, working with them actually on transactions, because we both had a passion for working with buyers, which really brought about, the 1031 exchange clientele, so to speak.
Got it. Got it.
Right.
Before getting into the next questions, I just wanted to learn from you because, when we got into the real estate private equity space, focused on multifamily and now BTR, SFR, because we were both real estate professionals. Ava was an agent for over a decade. I was in real estate for 16 years, or at the time, probably around 14, 15 years. There was a bit of a imposter syndrome. We felt like even though we were in real estate for such a long time, this was much bigger than us. And the level of education and background and the lingo, the way people spoke this business was so much bigger that it was really the start for us to eat, sleep, live, breathe commercial real estate to be at some level close to others who were in this space. When you come from the other space into this space, you have a great guide and partner like Logan. I'm sure he handed off a lot of ways for you to expedite the process and learning. But did you feel the same way? Dealing in tens of millions of dollars in transactions, you're not selling a home to a new couple who they just put something on the market and it sells and show them a few houses and they buy it. You're talking about commercial real estate. You're talking about multifamily. You're talking about institutions. Mm-hmm. Was there some anxiety there? How did you get into the space? And talk to us about that journey.
Yeah, so you bring up a really great point, because you are on some level not really being yourself at the start, right? Because I don't know what the heck cap rate was. I don't know what the heck some of these other terminologies are, and but of course I read a lot of books before I even got started in it. There's of course Bigger Pockets has tons of resources on there if you're familiar with Bigger Pockets, and podcasts, etc. And then there's actually a lot of LinkedIn resources. This is when I was an investor, right? So before I became an agent, I was an investor, and I bought my first investment was a fiveplex. Well, fiveplex down here in the U.S., you've got to have a commercial loan. And so I immediately had to learn about what the heck a commercial loan was and why that was different than a traditional loan. So that also helped accelerate some of that. But then the brokerage firm I started with, which again, it was where Logan was, they had a lot of great resources for just learning the lingo, calling buyers. And I had no problem ever with picking up the phone and just calling and speaking to somebody. And they would say words I had no idea what they were, and I'd write them down and look them up, or ask Logan, or ask other brokers in the office. But I think some of that consumer finance background we talked about at the beginning, it wasn't real estate based, but there was a lot of marketing and planning and cash on cash return metrics and, EBITDA kind of conversations that I was all part of and helping plan, that at least made it a lot quicker transition into the lingo than just coming from a single family home background.
EBITDA is the equivalent of NOI, right? In our space?
Pretty similar. Yeah. Earnings before income, depreciation, taxes, and amortization. So pretty similar.
Got it.
August, he immersed himself in this space.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I immersed myself because I thought I knew it all. I'd build homes, I'd build multifamily, I'd transacted all types of deals. I thought I was the man, and I show up to this space and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
This is the big boys league over here, and I had no other choice.
And now August is using all kinds of big fancy words.
I learned on the job with a gun to my head.
That's
the way to happen.
There you have it. All right, guys, let's get into things here. Alex, can you please explain to everybody what is a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, high level 1031 exchange is where you are selling. So an investor, you have to be a real estate investor, which means you have a piece of real estate investment property. You sell a piece of real estate, and then you defer all of your capital gains on that piece of real estate you're selling by reinvesting into another real estate asset. And that asset can be any asset class. So as long as it's an investment in active real estate. So you can go from farmland or multifamily or whatever, and buy into any other asset class or the same. And it's also state agnostic here in the United States. So you could be in Alaska and exchange into Missouri or vice versa. And there's a lot of key points in there. The big thing with the 1031 exchange is it's not like you get infinite time to do this. You only have 45 days from the moment you sell your property to identify up to 3 other properties. So, and there's, some ways to do more than 3 other properties and all that kind of stuff. But, and then from there, you have another 135 days to close out 1, 2, or 3 of those properties. So really it's a 6-month start to finish kind of thing, 180 days total. But the real important part at the beginning is, of course, those first 45 days is finding those replacement properties. And that's what we specialize in, is helping people find the replacement property for your 1031 exchange.
That's right. So it's like go time. You got to identify 3 particular investments that you want a 1031 exchange into, and then you pick the top one, and then you have to make that investment.
Or you can pick all 3.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, you can close on all 3 of those, or 2 of them, or just 1 of them. The typical process that we coach people on is you sell your down leg, what's called your down leg, the property you're selling, and from that moment you have the 45 days. So we coach them to, even before the 45-day window is up, to be under contract and pass due diligence on your replacement property, your number 1 replacement property. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's the best, the least riskiest situation for a person. The other important piece I forgot to mention is it's not like you can just go close a property that you're selling and then, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm just gonna go, do this. You have to actually put your funds with a qualified intermediary. So at title and escrow, you cannot take any kind of constructive control of this funds that you gained by selling this property. It has to be in a separate escrow account that you can't access. Now you can change your mind and say, hey, look, I'm not going to do a 1031 exchange. But if you take any kind of constructive control of that money, then you're paying taxes on that. There's no way around it. No oopsies, no accidents, no nothing. That's yours to pay the IRS at that point.
Got it. Quick question before we get into the other questions. 1031 exchange is a deferral, really a tax deferral process where you can defer your taxes moving forward. What happens at the end? So let's say somebody defers their taxes, and I know people who started with a single family home and they have over $1 billion of over $1 billion portfolio. What happens at that juncture when they pass on? Is the tax realized at that point? What tell us about the exit?
Yeah, so you're talking about when they die?
Yes.
Yeah, so when a person dies, that's another beauty of the 1031 exchange. Your tax burden dies with you. So if you've continued to exchange, and let's say you started in 1950 or whatever, right? I don't know what day you want to pick out. And now here you are, you're going to pass tomorrow. All of your taxes, all of your capital gains that you've made on this property die with you. So your family that inherits your property, assuming you have a will set up, they get to step up in basis. So their basis begins over at day 1. So it's a pretty incredible way to build wealth for your family if you get into it that way.
So is tax-free to your family, 100% tax-free at the time of sale?
So let's say you die, right? So you've got $1 billion in a portfolio. When your family inherits that, they start over at 0. So if they sold that property, let's say that you died yesterday, they sold it today, they would still pay the amount of money that they made on it, but they wouldn't pay all the other gains that they'd made through the period of the last 50 years in all the depreciation, because their depreciation would be at basically 0, right? Because they inherited it yesterday. So you have no capital gains tax on it, other than, let's say, if it's $1 billion, you're still paying Uncle Sam all that, but you're not paying the depreciation aspect of it that your family had done over a period of time.
I understand what you're saying. Now let's talk about somebody who wants to retire and cash out. Let's just say they're like, hey, I want to cash out of everything. I've accumulated all this real estate. I've 1031 exchanged into many different assets. What happens to all of those 1031 exchanges? Do they owe for all of those past 1031 exchanges?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So in that situation, you want to cash out, you want to get completely out of real estate, you want to just go put it in stocks or something else, then yes, you have to pay capital gains for every single depreciated time and asset. What a lot of people do, of course, is they will if they want to get completely out, they'll go into a DST, a Delaware Statutory Trust, which is still active ownership in real estate, but it's completely passive. You get it just a check every single week. It's your cash on cash return on something like that is probably around 4 or 5%. So it's not very good, but it does protect all of your tax implications. And for somebody that's got several $million in there, 4 or 5% with a regular check is still pretty nice. But yeah, if you went out and sold, then yeah, you're paying all your capital gains tax, which could be 30, 40, 50%.
Okay, Alex, and say that again. It was called a Delaware
Statute.
Yeah. So yeah, Delaware Statutory Trust, which is it's a secured asset. It's very similar to buying a REIT or a stock, but it's not. It's an active ownership in real estate, which you have to be to continue a 1031 exchange.
Okay, right on. Awesome. Okay, Alex, now how and why did you get focused on 1031 exchanges in your career?
Yeah, so when I was buying my real estate, and I still do buy, but when I was started out, I felt like agents were great people, smart people, but I felt like there was a gap in people who would help buyers in the real estate market. And there's so many agents that all they do is focus on getting the listings. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, will you please list your property with me? I'll get you the highest and best price, which is great. But I'm not a big fan of doing the proverbial dog and pony show and trying to win over a seller, when really what we're trying to do is match properties, right? Properties with buyers. And so the 1031 exchange, which is obviously, as we talked about, a pretty common way for people to continue to upgrade their wealth. I saw an opportunity actually with Logan and I were talking about how much opportunity there is there in helping people. No one's really helping people with that exchange from a real estate broker side. Yes, there's qualified intermediaries. Yes, every agent can help a buyer with that. But we actually go out and help and guarantee we will provide you 3 properties to identify for your 1031 exchange.
Nice.
And so we feel like, number one, there's a niche. Number two, that it's just part of our personalities is really helping buyers in the marketplace.
Well, that's fantastic.
Great.
We want to talk about 1031 exchanges as it's related to syndicated investments. Now, we were on a call with our lawyer, Dugan Kelly, yesterday, and we were asking him this question about, people coming in as a 1031 exchange, and it really depends on the lender. So can you give us a quick crash course on this, please?
Yeah, so a 1031 exchange in a syndicated deal is technically not a syndication. It would be called what's called a tenancy in common, right? So that would be a TIC investment. And if you look back in the day, in the 2000s, they got a really bad name for themselves, these TIC investments, because it was called tick, tick, boom. And what would happen is you had all these different owners owning a piece of an asset, and then there'd be a disagreement in it, and then the whole thing would fall apart, everybody would be upset. So there was been regulation and different things put in place to prevent a lot of those things. So now if you're a 1031 exchange person, you sold your 16 unit in Los Angeles, and you want to exchange that $5 million in equity into a different investment, you have to find a syndicator out there that specializes and sets up tenancy in common. And you usually want those to be only just a few owners, because what happens when you're a tenancy in common, you actually do own, and you're supposed to be managing that asset along with the other owners. So you're co-owning and co-managing. So it's a lot different than just being a passive investor from a syndicator standpoint. And so through that process, there's a lot more paperwork to set up, a lot more attorney fees to do to get a 1031 exchange TIC set up. And you have to do it very much on the front end of the acquisition of that asset. So you can't you could, but it's extremely difficult. But typically you have, let's say, an investment opportunity that you normally be syndicating. You would set up at the beginning more to be a TIC investment opportunity, because it's just, as you guys know, as you get further and further along within a real estate investment opportunity, that you can't just stop everything and redo the formation of the company and get everything set up that way. Then your securities are different. All those kind of moving parts has to be set up way at the beginning for a tenancy in common for a 1031 exchange to work.
That's
All
right.
right. Yeah, just to break that down a bit more for understanding. So a syndicated investment is usually what it means is a general partnership where the management team goes and sources a deal, brings the deal to passive investors who are usually limited partners within this entity, being a LLC or a limited partnership, and then this partnership basically buys the asset. What you say is that when it involves a 1031 exchange, the deal can still be structured either in an LLC or a limited partnership, but that person who is doing the 1031 exchange into the deal cannot play a passive role. They actually end up being possibly a co-GP on the deal and have to play an active role.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's the part of, if you're 1031 exchanging, you are an active real estate investor. And so if you're going to exchange via the IRS tax code, you have to actually use the same LLC, or even if it's just your own yourself that is selling an asset. That company that you had set up with your asset that you just sold has to be the same buyer in the new asset. You can't just set up a new entity and go in and out of things. It has to be the exact same asset. It's 100% exchanging in one asset into 100% exchanging into another asset using the same business that you have set up.
That's right. And correct me if I'm wrong. So there's obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of paperwork that's done up front. Most syndicators allow people that have an investment size of $1 million, let's say $750,000. It has to be above a certain price point, because then it's not really going to be worth it. Is that correct?
Yeah, right, exactly. You typically have much larger investments, and usually, for example, if you've got a $10 million industrial project going on, and you're in a syndicator, and you're like, hey, should I syndicate this? Maybe I should open up to a 1031 exchange buyers, so through a tick. Yeah, you want them to probably have $2 million, $1 million minimum to come into this thing, because as you guys talked about here a few seconds ago, yeah, you're basically a co-GP in this thing. And so even though you can be passive, you still have to have those agreements in place. It has to be worth your time to set up all the attorney work and the deal to be structured in that kind of way.
But the deal still can have other passive investors in it. Let's say you have 50 investors who come in as LPs, you still can have them and have these tenants in common
Yes.
who come in and exchange, because we've seen deals advertised where it's being advertised to a large database of people, but then it's also open to 1031. So we assume that that can be possible.
Yes, exactly. So you can have, and usually what they'll do is maybe they'll have three or four 1031 exchange come into one deal, plus then, like you said, 500 smaller investors or something like that, in this 10 to $20 million range. And then, yeah, you've got these two or three tick investors, plus then a syndication side that handles it. It's just, if you look at that way, you're really kind of structuring it two different money pools, right? You've got the 1031 money, which is maybe three or four people, and then you've got the passive investors, which is maybe 100 people. And so you've got to have good accountants and good attorneys and good people that know what the heck they're doing to be able to pull that off. That's why you don't see a ton of them. You see them, but you don't see them nearly as much as a syndication, just standard syndication model.
But that brings something to question. So I'm looking at it from a viewpoint of a syndicator, from somebody managing a real estate private equity firm, and we're looking to, raise more equity. So we want to open the door to 1031 exchange buyers or sellers rather, bringing in their equity into our deal. And the first thing that comes to mind is, how do we get to connect with these individuals? And first thing that comes to mind is brokers, because if you're a broker, you're literally in the front lines and you can see who's just sold the property. You could have possibly sold the property for your client, and then now you have these syndicated investments. Are you all? We know Logan is a broker, but is also a syndicator. Are you also involved in the syndication business as a GP?
No, typically I'm not. I am essentially a broker, right? So I'm out here looking for deals for buyers for the most part, really trying to match up buyers and sellers. And yes, we have people come to us and say, hey, look, I want to be passive. I've got a seller right now, actually. He's done with apartments. He's so sick and tired of apartments, but he wants a better return than what you can get in maybe the DST world, right? The Delaware Statutory Trust. He wants a better return than that. Okay, so then the other option to be passive or more passive is, the tick model, right? 1031 exchanging into a pseudo, looks like a syndication deal. The challenge for people like yourselves, I think, is number one, you have to get these people that don't want to be in a DST, but they want to be kind of active. You have to get comfortable with them being in your business because, again, they're co-GP essentially. And so that's one aspect of it. And then two, you have to have the timing lined up because remember, they only have 45 days to identify these 3 properties. So if, you don't have anything, I mean, you might be buying 5 deals, 2, 3, 5 deals a month. But what if you don't have anything for this investor that's a 1031 exchange investor? You can't just let them fall by the wayside. So you have to have a lot of confidence in what you can do for them. And you have to have confidence that if you're opening it up to a 1031 exchange investor, that you're going to have enough money to be able to get the deal closed in those kind of pools I talked about at the beginning, or a few minutes ago, where you've got the 1031 kind of pool, and then you've got the syndication pool, because, splitting those two out in a different ratio could put you on the back end if you've got to raise a heck of a lot more money at the end than bringing in that 1031 tick money at the beginning.
Can a syndicator 1031 exchange their promote or carried interest into another deal?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Good question, August.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know the answer.
As syndicators, we make profits as well, right? So at some point, and that was a question that wasn't really planned, but we have another question that's going to be also difficult, put you literally under the gun here.
Please, yes.
So the next question is Ava's question, but I'm going to steal it away from you because I'm about hard questions. And I don't expect you to know the answer, but what class in the CRE, in the commercial real estate space, what asset class is the most 1031 exchange into? And just to kind of itemize a few of those, there's multifamily, office space, retail, hospitality, what else? Industrial and BTR, SFR, built to rent, single family rental. And I don't expect you to know the stats to this, but you might. But if not, you can also answer it in your experience. Where are the investors looking to put their money? Triple net, I've heard as well. So please go ahead.
Yep. Yeah. So great question. It really is. I think what we see, at least in my business here in Kansas City, my focus is Kansas City, Kansas, Missouri. Our focus is the multifamily people. And a lot of times what we see is somebody that's got a duplex or a fourplex, and they want to take all that equity. They only have 4 units at the time. So they want to take all that equity in their fourplex, or maybe they have 2 fourplexes. And let's say they got $1 million in equity. So now they want to go out in Kansas City and buy $4 million worth of properties. So they take their $1 million in equity. Now they got $4 million worth of properties. And instead of having 4 units, maybe they got 20 units. That's the most common thing of what we see. And on the larger end, we still see something similar, right? Where they have maybe it's a 50-unit apartment complex, and they want to go out now and buy a 150-unit apartment complex. And that is by far the most common. And I think a lot of that comes down to, the appreciation, the returns you get on the multifamily side. A lot of people want to get into the industrial space, but there's just not enough of it out there for people to get into it and understand it. There's, it's another level, right? You have single family home, easy to understand. Everybody's kind of lived in one, or not everybody, but a lot of people lived in single family home. Apartments, everybody's either lived in an apartment or a single family home. Those are understandable. And then you get further and further away from it. And the further and further away you get from what people know, the harder it is to convince them to invest in something new. But we have had decent success getting people into the triple net lease space, either a neighborhood retail shopping center, even an industrial triple net lease, because you can show the investor, hey, look, all your expenses are paid for by the tenant. You don't pay for anything. And that's easy for them to wrap their mind around. Now, if it's a gross lease or some of these other kind of metrics, then their mind starts spinning and their head kind of pops off. So you got to be kind of careful with but most people want to invest in multifamily just because that's what they're most familiar with, and you get the best appreciation on in their opinion.
All right. Awesome, Alex. Now, right before we go on to the next segment of our show,
okay.
Alex, just so you know, we just went under contract on a build to rent in Arizona, and we have exactly 45 days until it closes. So if you know any 1031 exchange buyers, the timing is
awesome.
I thought he just convinced us not to bother with it. That's what I've learned from the whole show. It's
just hold up a
too
second.
Cumbersome, too much paperwork. We got somebody else in the kitchen with us.
I have to be honest. I know some of my very good friends that are like brilliant syndicators.
Yes.
They do this on every deal. Really? Yes, August.
All right.
They do it on every deal, and they have a couple ticks, and I talked to them about it, and yeah, people put a large sum in there.
All I gotta say is tick tick boom. Let's go.
Tick tick boom. Okay, Alex. On to the next segment of our show.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. Forgot to thank him for all the knowledge he gave us, all the stuff. Poor guy, we put him on the gun, questions he couldn't answer.
You're awesome.
We did everything. We threw everything and the kitchen sink at him. So now,
and I learned lots. And yeah, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about 1031 exchange before we move to the next segment of our show?
The only thing I would just really want to point out is the importance of understanding where the value of your wealth is. And people think that a lot of times it's, well, I sold this property and now I got a 1031 exchange. Well, the thinking should be, I get to sell this property and now look at all this equity I can use to upgrade my property. A lot of people in the syndication space already know that, because that's, the game is buy and sell, and you make money on all those different transactions and you continue to upgrade. But if you're doing a 1031 exchange, you have equity. If you don't have any equity, then you don't need to do an exchange because you lost money on it. So you have all this equity in there that you get to upgrade. So it's really about your return on your equity versus just buying something else. So that's an important factor, is look at your return on your equity as you're going through a 1031 exchange.
Right on.
I appreciate that. Great. Let's start the next segment of our show.
Drum roll, 10 championship rounds to financial freedom. So whatever comes top of mind, we love to learn more about who you are as a person. So here we go. I'm just going to start with the first question. Who was the most influential person in your life?
Probably my grandfather. My grandfather was a really hard worker. He had an 8th grade education. He stored a lot of his money away and gave it back to his family. And he was also kind of a perfectionist in how things look. And so he worked 2 jobs, I guess. I actually never knew him when he worked. He was retired by the time I, met him, so to speak. But he was also kind of the family, head of the family, so to speak. Not a godfather by any means, but everybody respected him as the... Yeah, exactly. So anyway, he's probably the person I looked up to the most in a lot of different ways, is his work ethic and understand. He had no idea really what money was, other than he needed to save it and earn it.
From Kansas, like that area, is that where he was from?
He was from the Lincoln and Omaha area of Nebraska.
Hardworking blue collar area, I guess. Yep. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, Alex, what is the number one book you'd recommend?
So my favorite book is Am I Being Too Subtle by Sam Zell, the billionaire investor. Amazing book. It's also worth not only reading it, but listening to him read it to you through the Audible version, because he reads it. And he's got this weird kind of raspy voice, but you might have to listen to it at maybe 2 times speed or something. But it's super interesting, and it's worth reading twice, because he's a guy who came from no real estate investment world. Sure, I think his family kind of had some money, but not a ton. And he just found ways to make deals. That's what he was about, is how can I make this deal work? Not, I don't like that deal. Is, what do I like about this deal? So that really gave me a lot of inspiration for, not only how I go about life, but how to coach clients as well.
Awesome. Quick story about Sam Zell. Steve Schwartzman.
I was going to tell the same story.
Were you? I'm quicker. You got to be faster next time. Steve Schwartzman leaves investment banking. I think JP Morgan, starts his own firm, Blackstone, just got a brand new office. He doesn't even have furniture in it. And he gets a knock on the door because they were featured in some news publication. And he opens the door, and there's this biker guy wearing all leather cap. And he's like, hey, I'm Sam Zell. And he's like, all right. So brings him to the office. There's no furniture to sit. So Sam sits on the floor, and they start talking for 3 hours about...
It's 2 hours, yeah.
2 hours about... Let me exaggerate a little bit, make the story more interesting. They sit down and they start talking about real estate investments, leverage buyouts, and everything they were doing. And I believe they ended up partnering. So it's tremendous what he's done. So a lot of people talk about Grant Cardone, but Sam Zell is really the godfather of all this stuff. He did get in trouble with SEC at some point early on, but he really paved the way for a lot of us in this space.
Awesome. Okay, next question, Alex. If you had the opportunity to travel back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
I've thought about that a lot, actually. Not not because I do anything much different, but the best wealth building advice I could give my younger self would be to buy a fourplex, live in one of those units, rent out the other three, heck, probably even rent out the other bedrooms in the unit that I'm living in, to really maximize, my ability to leverage as much as I could with a bank, right? And then continue to do that every 2 or 3 years until I got so sick and tired of it I couldn't do it. But that, to me, and I tell it to people all the time, is like, hey, how do I get started in this? I'm like, this is the best way you get started. Go out, buy a fourplex, live in one of those units, build your wealth through that way, do it again in 2 or 3 years, and keep doing that. And yeah, I think a lot of people, it's hard to understand when you're that young and you think you got to change toilets and all that kind of stuff. But that would have been an excellent wealth building tool.
Got it. All the young guys living in Vancouver and Toronto just pulled all of their hair out because a fourplex will cost you $2 million in Vancouver or Toronto. So
that's why we go to the US. Yeah, exactly. All right, Alex, what's the best investment you've ever made?
Well, I bought this fourplex recently, actually. Speaking of fourplexes, out close to my house, and it doesn't need a ton of work, but I decided I'm just going to redo everything. And by the time I'm done, it's going to be basically a brand new fourplex that I can get for half market value. Fingers crossed, we have some long-term tenants in there that stay forever. So far, that seems to be my favorite investment.
Very cool. Awesome. Now, what's the worst investment you've ever made, and what lessons did you learn from it?
Well, I bought 4 large houses in the urban core of Kansas City, hot areas, but I bought them as Airbnb houses. And I had to spend $20,000 per house furnishing those. And then about 6 months later, the pandemic hit. No one could travel. Oh, and by the way, there's real estate laws and regulations that Kansas City enacted for how to operate Airbnbs and have licenses, and it became very, very much not worth my time and effort. And so I sold them, and I actually had to give one back to the owner because it was on a lease purchase option. So the biggest thing I learned from that was to because what happened there was I was actually trying to get out of my day job. I talked about that, right? My day job, always looking for a new job. So that was kind of my attempt to accelerate that. Well, what I learned from that is I got to have patience, because other opportunities finally presented themselves, but I was so wanting to get out of it, I made some bad decisions on investments. And so I think just having some patience and doing a little bit more due diligence is absolutely what I learned from that.
All right. Okay. Right on. Next question. How much would you need in the bank to retire today? What's your number?
I don't know that's a great question. I don't know. It's probably a couple $1 million. I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint because, you like your lifestyle, but you don't know what it's going to cost later on. And even if you pay off your houses, you still got a lot of taxes to pay. So I would say at least $1 million.
Yeah. It's a tough question.
Hanging out with Logan, you're going to hit that and break that in no time.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. Now, if you could have dinner with someone dead or alive, who would it be?
I'd love to have dinner with Sam Zell, especially after hearing that story. That'd be a good one. He'd be a great person to get his perspective on everything. I think he would be genuine and down to earth. Probably take me to a good steakhouse, which I'd like. So that'd be great.
Oh, sorry. The question is, you're taking somebody out for dinner and you're paying for it. So it's that's okay.
Well, I'd still pay for his. That's no problem. Nice steakhouse, sure. Why not?
There you go. It's worth it, right? All right. Now, okay, if you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing now?
If I was not in this industry, what would I be doing? That's a great question. Maybe it's similar, I guess, maybe building houses, maybe be an architect. I always wanted to be an architect. But it takes a lot of math skills and stuff that I don't have. So, but I'd probably be trying to design houses, design something. I actually have a degree in graphic design and economics, which are two kind of weird things. So probably something similar to in that realm of designing homes, I think.
Very cool. All right. Book smarts or street smarts?
Got to go with street smarts. Wow. You got to be able to live in the world. I go back to my grandfather, right? He had an 8th grade education, but he knew core values of family, saving money, working hard, giving it back to the people that he cared for. So I think that is the most important part is having the street smarts to survive.
Okay, last question, Alex.
I think I might know the answer to this, but you can try.
Let's see. Okay, now, if you had $1 million cash and you had to make one investment today, what would it be?
Well, I invest in real estate. I would invest it in Kansas City.
Okay.
In probably a 1990s, early 2000s multifamily asset that each one of those units had a garage and everything was separately metered. Basically, what I'm getting at is something that it's not brand new construction, so it's super expensive, but it's new enough construction. It's got modern technology in it. Everything's separate, so there's low owner responsibility. I think that would be the best investment that I know of today.
All right.
Golden. We got to go visit Kansas City.
Yeah, we'll have to. Put it on the bucket list, August.
And we'll take Alex for some steak.
I'll take you out for some steak.
Okay,
all right, man.
we're
Let's
on
do
our
it.
way. We're on our way. Love it, because I love steak too. So, Alex, just let everybody know, what is the best way that they can reach you, please?
Yes. So I'm all over LinkedIn. You can search for my name, Alex Olson, on LinkedIn. That's one way. The best way is through email, and that's going to be alex@XChangeCRE.com. And Exchange starts with an X, so it's XChangeCRE.com.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I really enjoyed our time with you. Logan made the invitation, so we couldn't say no to you. So we got you on the show. We recorded it. Really appreciate your time.
We learned a lot from you, and everybody's going to find lots of value. So thank you so much for being on our show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope this conversation enlightened you on how to win big in this highly profitable and risk-averse space. Get on your feet and embrace this world that offers so many opportunities just waiting for you out there. Continue your journey to becoming a savvy real estate expert by subscribing to the show at cpicapital.ca. Don't forget to leave a positive rating and share with your friends. See you on the next one.